Welcome to The Explainer. If you're prepping for your couples and family therapy exam and feeling completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of theories, pioneers, and vocabulary words swimming around your textbook, well, take a deep breath. You are in exactly the right place. We're going to distill all that systems theory down into a highly focused ultimate exam review to lock in exactly what you need to know to ace this test.
Here is our blueprint for today's review session. We'll be hitting the systemic paradigm shift, core systems vocabulary, Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems, the early systemic pioneers, structural and strategic models, and finally, mapping the history with genograms.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the systemic paradigm shift.
If you see a question about this shift on your test, keep this in mind. The hardest adjustment for Western-trained counselors is actually adopting that systemic perspective. Why? Well, Western psychology traditionally isolates the individual, right? The focus was entirely intrapsychic, looking at private, internal drives. But systemic practitioners, they zoom way out. They understand that to truly help a client, you have to look at the complex transactions, the behavioral sequences, the mutual interdependence. The symptom isn't just inside the person, it literally lives in the space between people.
Moving right along to Section 2, Core Systems Theory Vocabulary. I want you to treat these next few concepts like your high-end digital flashcards. First up is cybernetics. The text notes that anthropologist Gregory Bateson actually borrowed this term from a mathematician named Norbert Wiener. Originally, it was used to describe how machines use feedback to correct themselves, but Bateson brilliantly applied it to humans. It's all about how family systems use communication and feedback to self-regulate, face challenges, and just remain stable.
Now, take linear causality. This is your traditional, super straightforward idea that event A simply causes event B. You push a domino, it falls over. Simple, right? But as the text explicitly points out, family dynamics and human interactions are almost never this simple.
Instead, cybernetics gives us circular causality. Think of this as continuous, endless loops of interaction. Entity A influences B, who influences C, which loops right back around to influence A. In a family argument, no single person just starts the fight out of nowhere. Every single person is reacting to a reaction in a continuous cycle.
When you get tested on feedback loops, remember this crucial contrast. In cybernetics, positive and negative absolutely do not mean good and bad. A positive feedback loop is one that forces or initiates change within the system. A negative feedback loop, on the other hand, pulls the system right back to its original status quo. It maintains homeostasis and balance by correcting any deviations to keep things exactly as they were.
Similarly, you need to keep these two distinct for the exam. First-order changes are superficial adjustments. It's kind of like doing the exact same thing just a little bit harder. It's actually an effort to maintain constancy. Second-order change, though, that is what therapists are usually aiming for. It's a change to the system itself, an enduring, fundamental transformation of the family's rules and processes.
And our final vocab word in this section is equifinality. This is biologist Ludwig von Bertalanffy's reminder that living human systems are definitely not closed machines. Because families are open systems, they aren't locked into single outcomes by fixed structures. They can actually reach the exact same healthy destination through multiple, completely different but equally valid paths.
Okay, on to Section 3, Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems.
So Urie Bronfenbrenner made this incredible observation. You simply cannot understand a person without understanding the ecological systems surrounding them, stretching all the way from their immediate family up to time itself. He effectively brought this massive, wide-angle systems perspective directly into developmental psychology. Let's break down his pyramid step by step for your notes. First, you have the microsystem. These are groups with direct impact, like family and peers. Second is the mesosystem, which is the interaction between those microsystems, like a parent-teacher conference. Third, the exosystem, an indirect system, say a parent's workplace, that still really impacts the child. Fourth is the overarching macrosystem, representing broad societal culture, laws, and socioeconomic status. And finally, the chronosystem, which measures life course changes and historical events over time.
Next up, Section 4, the early systemic pioneers.
Now we transition into the who's who of family therapy,
I know, keeping all these names straight can be a total nightmare when you're studying, so let's tie each figure to their most testable trait. First is Alfred Adler. The text highlights that Adler was systemic before the word systemic even existed in our profession. Way back in the 1920s, he pioneered the focus on social embeddedness, the family constellation, and birth order. And get this, he was also the first psychologist to actually conduct family counseling sessions in open community settings.
Following Adler, we have Murray Bowen. His model is deeply rooted in evolutionary biology, which is why you'll sometimes see it called natural systems theory. Bowen brought us some incredibly important, highly testable concepts, things like the differentiation of self, triangulation, emotional cutoff, and the absolute necessity of multi-generational assessment. For Bowen, effective clinical practice required a rock-solid theoretical orientation.
That brings us to Section 5, Structural and Strategic Models.
Moving into the eras that completely dominated the 1970s and 80s, the key differentiator you need to remember for your test is this. Salvador Minuchin is the master of structural family counseling. He focused heavily on the structural organization of families, specifically looking at boundaries, subsystems, and therapeutic joining. On the flip side, Jay Haley, working alongside others at the MRI, strategically examined hierarchies of power and function, using a very problem and solution-focused approach.
And finally, Section 6, Genograms, Mapping the History. Look, I know this is a massive amount of information to memorize, so let's ask the critical question to tie it all together. How do all these early pioneers logically connect, transition, and ultimately evolve into today's modern evidence-based practices? This genogram acts as your visual cheat sheet, charting the entire history of the field. You can literally trace the direct lineage from early pioneers like Adler and Bowen, moving straight through the structural and strategic models, pushing into the postmodern transition with narrative and solution-focused therapies, all the way down to today's evidence-based models like Gottman's couple science and emotionally focused therapy. It brilliantly organizes all these separate minds into one cohesive narrative map.
Before we wrap up today's review session, there's a core philosophy from the text you absolutely must remember. In family practice, it is impossible to separate the person from the professional. You are the instrument of change. That means engaging in your own personal development and really understanding your own family of origin isn't just optional, it's absolutely central to practicing ethically and effectively. So as you walk into that exam room, consider this final thought. We've reviewed the underlying structures, the strategic interventions, and the massive ecological contexts that shape human lives. But beyond the exam, which of these diverse systemic lenses will you ultimately adopt to foster resilience and growth in your own practice? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. And seriously, best of luck in your test. You're going to crush it.